I want to make sure that I don't come across like I'm the victim, because we have two victims here. And the second thing is that all of what happened on that day leading up to this event was precipitated on one idea, and that is that Halyna and I had something profound in common. And that is, we both assumed the gun was empty.
Your emotions are so clearly so right there on the surface. You felt shock. You felt anger. You felt sadness. Do you feel guilt?
No. I feel that there is, I feel that someone is responsible for what happened, and I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay, how is everybody? Thanks for your patience. I didn't quite understand or get the time difference, so we're doing this a little bit later. But I wanted to talk to you today about Alec Baldwin and his trial. It's begun today, and how I think it's going to go, and what the chances are for Alec Baldwin, and what are some of his advantages and disadvantages. For one, his advantage is that he has an incredible team of lawyers, one of the greatest outfits in New York as far as lawyers go. And his lawyer has represented many famous people. Spivro, I think his name is. I know I'm mispronouncing his name. And he seems to be quite tough on cross-examinations. Alan Jackson has nothing on him. But this is a group of lawyers that are all Ivy League educated and argued vigorously that this should never go to trial. But what they have gotten thrown out is the fact that Alec Baldwin cannot be referred to as the producer of this film, even though he was. And I think that's really, in my eye, at least from Hannah Gutierrez Reed's trial, really the crux of the case against him. He set the tone. When people had problems with the conditions and wanted more money, they came to Alec Baldwin. He said he and his assistant director all thought that the safety conditions were up to snuff. And I know that they're going to bring it up. We'll see it in opening statements. We're going to go through opening statements, that they all thought that it was A-OK on the set as far as conditions safety-wise on the set. Now, what I think he has going against him is perhaps his celebrity, perhaps that is a positive, depending on who this jury is. He has a horrible personality. I mean, that's my view. He's certainly not well liked in New York. He's sort of more tolerated in New York City as someone who lives here, one of the few celebrities that lives here. But it could go against him. The local New Mexico people could be like, you're not coming into our town and committing you don't know how to handle a gun. You don't know that you don't check. You don't point a gun. And his defense team is going to argue that the rules for Screen Actors Guild are the rules for the land. Like, this is the way they were taught in Screen Actors Guild. It wasn't his duty to check the gun. Which is odd, because if that were the case, then why have him go to gun safety classes that he blew off and was on his phone with his pretend Spanish wife during and didn't really pay attention to. I don't know. But I have a feeling that he might get away with this. I hate predicting a jury, how a jury is going to go. You never know. But I wouldn't be surprised if he gets an acquittal in this case. But is the greater crime for him, the greater punishment, for someone like Alec Baldwin to really lose his career and his social cachet, his social standing? Is that really a greater crime? Because he says that they're filming a reality show right now I think it's for TLC, if I'm remembering correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. And he says that he will bring the reality cameras to prison. Good luck with that, Alec Baldwin, or to jail. And I'm sure he'll film like it'll be like Cool Hand Alec Baldwin, like Cool Hand Luke in there. But I think that Alec Baldwin, I've done many episodes on Alec Baldwin and his history of saying things like, I wonder what it feels like to accidentally kill someone. He has gotten on so many innocence fraud campaigns for killers, and some of the worst ones, Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, Teresa Hallback's killer, Officer Daniel Faulkner's killer, Mumia Abu Jamal, as well as Heyman Lee's killer, Adnan Syed. And I think he really identifies the whole plot point of Rust. If I can believe what I read in the papers, is that it's about someone who was accidentally shot and killed. And that's Harlan Rust, Alec Baldwin's big cross to bear in life. Isn't that an interesting coincidence? And I found it very interesting in the opening statements that the prosecutor said what I've been saying all along, is that he was play acting. He was in a fantasy. Think about it. There was no need to pull the gun and aim it, although the defense very cleverly is trying to trick the jury and make them think that he was practicing for that shot. That's not the shot that they were filming. So they showed the jury the shot where he aims the gun and points almost at the camera that they filmed before this happened. Not after lunch when Halyna Hutchins was tragically and unnecessarily killed by Alec Baldwin. But you have to remember, what were the conditions when this happened? This is why I say he was in a fantasy. Much of his crew had left over safety issues, over the pandemic, over pay issues. But safety was a key issue mixed in there. And he had to be feeling frustrated that they weren't going to get the amount of shooting done. And he was trying to do all this great movie, his great return. Remember, he was once an A-list actor, married to Kim Basinger. And I'm sure the younger people in the audience may not even know who she is, Kim Basinger. She was a huge sex symbol in the 80s, actor. Had it all, good looks, could do comedy roles, dramatic roles. I really think he's a much better comic actor. But think about what he was doing. Even if you point your finger at a crowd of people and pretend to fire, you're in a fantasy of killing someone. And I think this has been a fantasy of Alec Baldwin's for many, many years. It's a constant theme with Alec Baldwin in his own statements and his own words. So I think this was something he wanted to do. Accidentally kill someone. I don't think he thought the gun was going to go off. Did I think he thought there were real bullets? No. But he was prepared to take that risk by cocking the pistol and firing it. So now the defense strategy has changed, where it's no longer that he didn't pull the trigger. It's that he didn't knowingly pull the trigger. He didn't realize he pulled the trigger. We're going to watch all of these opening statements from both the prosecution and the defense tonight. And I was very interested that Carrie Morrissey, who was she's still prosecuting Alec Baldwin, but she didn't do the opening. Prosecutor Johnson did for the state. I thought that was an interesting switcheroo. I think Carrie Morrissey really shines. I happen to find her not very likable, but that doesn't matter. I think she's very good at getting very complicated information over to a jury and making it interesting. And I was surprised she didn't do the opening, but I assume she will do the closing, which is infinitely more important in a manslaughter trial like Alec Baldwin. So here is Prosecutor Johnson. Let's take a listen, shall we?
When someone plays make-believe with a real gun in a real-life workplace, and while playing make-believe with that gun violates the cardinal rules of firearm safety, people's lives are endangered, and someone could be killed. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what this case is about. It's simple, it's straightforward. The evidence will show that someone who played make-believe with a real gun and violated the cardinal rules of firearm safety is the defendant, Alexander Baldwin. You will hear.
You have to remember also that Halyna Hutchins had a lot of respect of the crew, a lot of admiration from the crew, a lot of power. And it's very interesting when Alec Baldwin talks about this dinner that happened. Did it really happen? We were friends. We went out to dinner once, right? The night before. What happened at the dinner? Did she rebuff his advances? Is that what happened? Or was it just her mere power on the set? Why was he aiming why was she fatally injured and no one else? And I think that she was a threat to Alec Baldwin. You notice that Alec Baldwin, all of his rages are from him feeling small, from him feeling slighted, from him feeling disrespected, whether it's a cop when he's riding in the bicycle lane that he's going to abuse, whether it's a paparazzi that gets too close to his fake Spanish wife, Hillary Thomas Baldwin, or whether, and in this case, was it the really talented cinematographer who really had the respect and the ears and the power on the set. This was his passion project, his crew, his set, his creation totally. And once again, this is where I think the prosecution is at a big disadvantage to not say he set the tone. All this lackadaisical use of firearms was A-okay. He thought that was safe, having worked on how many films with firearms? So, yeah, he was in a fantasy. He's playing make-believe. Why? Why was his fantasy to take out his prop gun, cock the pistol? To me, it makes much smaller difference whether he pressed the trigger or not. Why did he cock the gun? That's a really deliberate action that you can't ignore. There's no need to cock the gun unless you're going to fire it. This is why no one believes him when he says, oh, I didn't fire the gun. And if you were listening to my live stream, there was a moment where I was playing Alec Baldwin's abuse of the paparazzi, where he threw first he did a racial slur at a paparazzi, and then a homophobic slur. And his defense before the film was brought up to his attention, then he apologized, was, no, I didn't say it. So his first reaction to being caught to anything is to say, I didn't do it. Oh, I didn't fire the guy. I would never. Isn't that the liar's argument? I would never do that. I would never. Never fire a gun, never point a gun at a crowd of people 3 feet away from me and fire. A crew who were working for pennies for me. It's really one of the saddest cases. I mean, just so unnecessary and so I think in some ways a symbol of Alec Baldwin's entitlement and callousness.
Over the course of the next few days, that in the fall of 2021, a movie called Rust began filming at the Bonanza Creek Ranch just south of Santa Fe in Santa Fe County. You will learn that this movie was a Western with a lot of gun action. And while it was a movie set, it was a real life workplace for many people. But you will hear this workplace was on a tight budget. And you will learn that some of the people who were hired to work at this workplace were very inexperienced. And one of those was the armorer, a very young woman named Hannah Gutierrez Reed. You will hear testimony from crew members who worked on the set, who will tell you that to them.
So if I were on the defense, I would say every budget, whether it's a blockbuster budget, is on a tight budget. They all want to save money. That was, I believe, Mamie Mitchell's testimony in Hannah Gutierrez Reed's trial, and it's absolutely true. But I wonder if this was edited from, I wonder if they wrote this before this ruling that they couldn't call him a producer. Because doesn't it seem like the next idea is like, oh, he set the tone. They were on a tight budget. They hired inexperienced people. They cut corners. They cut corners for safety. He was the one who did it. Seems logical to me. But just pretty interesting. Also that Alec Baldwin is in his Jodi Arias glasses, trust me suit. Find that funny.
Ms. Gutierrez's inexperience was obvious. You will also learn that this workplace has some talented people. And one of those was the director of photography, a vibrant 42-year-old rising star named Halyna Hutchins. You will also learn that the director of this film was Joel Souza, another talented individual who cares deeply for his projects. The evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that like in many workplaces, there are people who act in a reckless manner and place other individuals in danger and act without due regard for the safety of others. That, you will hear, was the defendant, Alexander Baldwin, the lead actor on this film. You will learn that this movie began filming on or about October 6, 2021. But the defendant did not arrive on set to begin working until about October 13. And you will learn that prior to arriving on the set to work, he requested to be assigned the biggest gun available. So he was assigned this revolver, a replica of an 18.
Is this the time to make big gun jokes? I don't know. He wanted the biggest gun possible, maybe to make up for small member complex. That's all I could think of.
1973 single action revolver manufactured by Pieta Firearms in Italy. You will hear from Alessandro Pieta, who will tell you he manufactured this gun. And he will tell you he manufactured it in 2015. And he will explain the quality control measures that Pieta Firearms follows in order to ensure that firearms that are manufactured by Pieta Firearms don't have any problems or issues. Mr. Pieta will tell you that this firearm he himself manufactured, and that when Pieta sent it to EMF, which is the company that distributes firearms for Pieta Firearms in the United States, this gun was in perfect working condition. You will hear from Justin Neal, who is a representative of EMF, a company out of California that has historically been known to provide firearms to the movie industry. Mr. Neal will tell you that when EMF received this firearm in 2017, it was in perfect working order. And in fact, when EMF had this firearm, it was subjected to numerous quality control inspections because it was used as a show gun at gun shows. The evidence will show that in September of 2021, an individual by the name of Seth Kenny was contacted by the folks with Rust Production. They asked Mr. Kenny if he would be able to provide some firearms for the filming, for use during the filming of Rust. You will learn that Mr. Kenny owns PDQ Firearm and Prop. It's a duly licensed firearms dealership. Mr. Kenny then contacted EMF and ordered.
Let me just make a correction. Alec Baldwin's lawyer is Alex Spiro, excuse me for getting that wrong. But, you know, I found Seth Kinney a really untrustworthy character. And and he got caught, if I'm remembering correctly, in a few lies on the stand in Hannah Gutierrez's retrial. I just never trusted his evidence, but it was one of the reasons I felt a little uncomfortable about Hannah Gutierrez Reed's conviction. But there's Alec Baldwin. This is the weirdest thing weirdest thing about defendants, and they all seem to have what I would consider guilty defendants. They all seem to have the same demeanor, like they're a star student in class and they're studying the evidence from afar, like without any kind of passion, and just coldly looking at the evidence like, isn't that interesting? Like it has nothing to do with them. No matter how awful or emotionally evocative it is, they're just like, isn't that, let me study that. Isn't that interesting? And we saw some horrible footage today of the first responders getting to the scene. It was awful.
Single action replica revolvers. And in September, or on September 29, 2021, Mr. Kenny purchased this gun. And you will hear that Mr. Kenny received it from EMF and it was in perfect working order. The only thing that Mr. Kenny did to this gun was to insert the firing pin, because since it was a show gun, it didn't have a firing pin. But you'll learn that that's a very easy step. All he had to do was just insert the pin and that's it. And then Mr. Kenny had the firearms, this one and some other firearms, transferred to the set of Rust at the Bonanza Creek Ranch. And on October 13th, 2021, the defendant was supposed to have a training session with this gun and this young armorer. But you will see that during this training session, the defendant had somebody or a couple of people filming him while he's running around shooting this gun. You will learn, ladies and gentlemen, or you'll hear during this trial, the use of the words prop gun. And you'll learn a prop gun is this real gun. It's not a toy. It's not made of rubber. It's a real gun. You will also see evidence, ladies and gentlemen, that during the days before that fateful October 21st day, the defendant handled this firearm multiple occasions. You will see video footage of the defendant firing this firearm, working perfectly fine. But you'll see evidence later. And you'll hear that the reason he didn't do a safety check is because he didn't want to offend her.
Right. He didn't want to offend her. This is so ridiculous. And you'll see him handling the gun many times and all badly.
The evidence you will see will paint a real life picture of a real life workplace where this defendant mishandled this gun. You will see him using this gun as a pointer to point at people, to point at things. You will see him cock the hammer when he's not supposed to cock the hammer. You will see him put his finger on the trigger when his finger's not supposed to be on the trigger. You will hear about numerous breaches of firearm safety with this defendant and this use of this firearm. And the evidence will show that on the morning of October 21st, 2021, the camera crew walked off set. And you will learn that one of the reasons that camera crew walked out is because they were concerned over safety breaches with the use of firearms. The evidence will show that.
Right. And, the image I get when I think about this case is of Russian roulette. So Alec Baldwin didn't intend for this to happen, but he was, how do you say that when you're playing Russian roulette? It's like the thrill of, is it going to happen? Am I going to accidentally kill someone? Why, this was on his mind his whole life. It's so bizarre. And so you can see him flailing the gun around. And why, and also the other mystery of this case is, why was he saying in another shot, hey, I don't want to point the gun at you? But why that day was he so happy to point the gun at a crowd of people? Seemed almost as if he aimed it at Halyna and was cocked the pistol and pressed the trigger. Why was it that day, the day of enormous pressures, the day when he didn't know he was going to finish his film, if he didn't know he could pull this off, when he had money on the line? And you can see, the shot that we're all used to from, and I think I'll see if I can pull it up, is of Alec Baldwin kind of hunched over, almost looks like he's vomiting, talking to, the caption is that he was talking to his wife on the phone. But you can see what we saw today was footage of Alec Baldwin just calmly, I think he was smoking a cigarette, if I'm right after it happened. And everyone rushed up to Halyna and to see what had happened, but not Alec Baldwin. He's like, oh, I thought she fainted. Really? And the point John Schneider makes from him, the actor from Dukes of Hazzard, really? When you feel the kickback from the gun and you hear a loud boom, you're confused? You think someone fainted? Why is he confused?
The morning of October 21st started out a couple of hours behind. They filmed some scenes at this church on the Bonanza Creek Ranch. And you will see that one of those scenes required the defendant to pull out his gun. This was in the morning. Pull out his gun. And you'll hear the director tell him, pull it out and hold it. And the first time, you'll see evidence the defendant does what the director tells him. But you will hear the director tell you that many times the defendant would do his own thing. So then the director in the morning asked him, okay, do it again, just like you did now. The defendant pulls out the gun, but this time he cocks the hammer. The evidence will show they then broke for lunch. And around 1:30 or so, they came back to this church to do what's called a blocking. The evidence will show that Ms. Hutchins wanted to do a blocking for an insert. And you will learn what a blocking is, just working out the details of the moves of the actor. Wasn't even a rehearsal. You will hear from one of the witnesses who walked into the church and saw the defendant kind of playing with his gun. And then you will see evidence or hear evidence that Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were talking to the defendant about doing this insert. And the insert was just supposed to be from here to here. And it was supposed to be of the defendant just slowly taking his gun out of his holster, and just holding it at an angle. The evidence will show that someone asked the armorer to bring the defendant's gun to him. And she did. She brought it into the church, showed it to David Halls, who you will learn was the first assistant director. The gun was empty. Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun to the defendant. But then you will hear that Ms. Gutierrez was given the gun back, and she took it and loaded it with dummy rounds. And what you will learn is that dummy rounds are inert rounds. They look like real rounds, but they are very easy to tell that they are not because they'll rattle. Ms. Gutierrez then went back to the church, showed the revolver to the first assistant director very fast. They only checked about 3 rounds, very quick. And they missed 1 round. You will learn that one of the rounds in that revolver was a real round. And the evidence will show that Ms. Gutierrez then handed the gun to the defendant. And what you will learn is that once again, the defendant failed to do a gun check or a safety check with this armorer. So he takes the firearm, puts it in his holster. Then Ms. Hutchins and Mr. Souza were doing this blocking. And the evidence will show, ladies and gentlemen, that the defendant, again, did his own thing. You will hear from an individual by the name of Kent Jorgensen. Mr. Jorgensen will tell you that he's been involved in drafting and revising movie set safety rules. You will learn that these movie set safety rules require actors.
And so this is like Alec Baldwin's just writing the great American novel. And if you're wondering what the defense's position is Alec Baldwin was in character. He's a movie actor. He's meant to act. He, basically the Screen Actors rules, which put the responsibility for the gun safety in the armorer's hand and the first assistant director's hands, which was Hall's, that he had nothing to do with safety, and let him go. He was in character, and he was just playing a character and acting like all actors act. So it just really, to my eye, whether he's going to get away with this just really depends on who the jury is and how this trial is going to go, who they're going to believe, who are the defense witnesses. Did Alec Baldwin pay the big bucks for expert witnesses? Is the jury going to believe that like I said, the SAG rules are the rules of the land, when every gun owner will tell you that the rules, let's just switch. Let me just move forward to the defense's opening and just give you like a little bit of a flavor, since we had a little bit. I thought it was a good opening. When I watched it again, I appreciated more for the prosecution, but let's watch a little bit of the opening of the defense. Hold on 1 second. And then I'm going to play a little bit of John Schneider's video to tell you what he thinks, and really represents so much of what so many gun owners think.
To involuntary manslaughter. Thank you.
Mr. Spiro?
Spyro. I'm even mispronouncing it wrong now. Okay, so it's not Spiro, it's Spyro. Okay. Alex Spyro. He's a very in-demand defense attorney, and you can see why. You can get a little flavor of his opening. He really is fun to watch. You know, when I was a juror, the judge said to us, "Will you not hold it against these lawyers?" How many of you watch Law and Order? And a few people raise their hand. She's like, "Will you not hold it against these lawyers for not being Hollywood actors?" But this guy is at the level of a Hollywood actor as far as dramatics and as far as connecting with a jury. You can see why he gets the big bucks.
Just touch the screen. Yeah. Have to touch it harder. Okay, street talk.
All set? May I proceed? Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. This was an unspeakable tragedy, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. He was an actor acting, playing the role of Harlan Rust. An actor playing a character can act in ways that are lethal.
Right. Don't you know that he's just playing a role of a character who would take a gun, cock it, and fire it into a group of people. Group of people he hired and is paying to make him look good on film. That kind of character.
Lethal that just aren't lethal on a movie set. These cardinal rules, they're not cardinal rules on a movie set. And I don't have to tell you much more about this because you've all seen gunfights in movies. And the reason that can happen is because safety is ensured before the actor. On this movie set, there were people responsible for ensuring the safety of the set and the firearm. Those people failed in their duties, but Alec Baldwin committed no crime. The most critical issue in this case is how a real bullet.
Right. It's not illegal to hire incompetent people. It's not illegal to cut corners with safety. This reminds me so much. Did you guys know about the Twilight Zone trial? It's a trial I'm fascinated with. One of the longest, most expensive trials in LA history. And 3 people were killed in a tragic accident, and a lot of shenanigans, a lot of defense shenanigans. They had a dream team way before OJ. John Landis, the director, did. He's also the director of the Blues Brothers and Animal House, and really was on a high, career high, but very young before that tragic accident that took the life of Vic Morrow and 2 young children that he got that weren't professional actors, that he got from a charity. John Landis did, because he didn't want to abide by the rules of the Screen Actors Guild.
That got on a movie set. The evidence will show that real bullets are never supposed to be on movie sets. Movie sets use dummies and blanks. Movie sets use dummies, fake inert bullets that look like real bullets, they don't go bang, for when you want a close-up of the gun. You can't tell them apart from live bullets by looking at them, which is why live bullets can be nowhere near a movie set. And if the director wants a shot of the gun going, bang, poof, there's blanks that they can use. And those blanks look nothing like real bullets. And they are used for those shooting scenes. And, they'll play these videos that they described of Alec's, firearm in the movie going bang, poof, and people are conditioned to seeing people firing weapons and thinking that's a dangerous act. That's a dangerous act. And they will play those videos and give you that image to try to tarnish him in your eyes. But that's not what happened here. On this set, there was a real bullet, something that should never be on a movie set, something which has nothing to do with making a movie. And you will hear no evidence, not one word, that Alec Baldwin had anything to do with that real bullet being brought onto that set. The second critical issue in this case is, why did a real bullet get loaded into a prop movie gun? It is undisputed that the bullet was loaded into...
Right. Forget Brandon Lee in The Crow, who died from a dummy bullet. Just because you see him waving a gun around doesn't mean it's dangerous. I mean, you're conditioned to see a gun, someone waving it around flagrantly and violating all safety rules. You're just conditioned to see that as dangerous. But here he was just acting, guys. And it was just the fact that a real bullet got on the set, something that should never be. I'm so curious. I would be so curious to hear the jury deliberations in this trial. And if they discuss Alec Baldwin's position as senior position, even if it's not producer, position of power on the set.
Into the gun by the armorer, the person on set whose responsibility it was to ensure the gun was safe. And so picture that moment of the armorer placing a live bullet into that firearm. You hear the prosecutor say, he did this, or he performed in a certain way. He picked out the biggest gun as his prop. It's to tarnish him in your eyes. You will hear no evidence whatsoever. No evidence that anything Mr. Baldwin did, that something he did in that moment, that horrible moment when she put that bullet in that gun, none of it had anything to do with Alec Baldwin. And finally, the first assistant director's job, the head of safety, Dave Halls, checks it before it goes to the actor. And he will tell you he made a tragic mistake. He failed to detect a live bullet. And Alec Baldwin had nothing to do with that either. So
from his testimony in Hannah Gutierrez Reed's trial, which was so interesting, it changed from him handing the gun to Hannah handing the gun, which I also thought was untrustworthy. Everybody else said that Dave Halls handed him the gun, but he said Hannah handed him the gun, which I thought was odd, but he admitted he didn't check. Thanks, Dan Lawrence, for becoming a member. And so they're going to just say this is the pass the buck place of the defense. But isn't he slick?
All this evidence that the prosecutor just outlined, all of it, has nothing to do with these critical issues. Nothing. Which leads us to this. The evidence will show that on a movie set, safety has to occur before the gun is placed in the actor's hands. In this case, this unique case on a movie set, the prop gun was placed in Mr. Baldwin's hands and cold gun was announced, meaning it had been checked and double checked by those responsible to ensure the gun was safe. It was just a prop. They all thought it was just a prop and could do no harm. The actor's job is to act, to rehearse, to choreograph his moves, to memorize his lines. He's Harlan Rust. He's an outlaw running for his life, who in the incident in question, he's pulling a 6-shooter to try to defend himself. That's why the gun has to be safe before it gets into the actor's.
Right. He's Harlan Rust, and he's going to shoot random people at random, anyone in his vicinity, even when the cameras aren't running, and and it's not even the shot that they're practicing. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that he wasn't practicing the shot of fully drawing the pistol. It was just partially drawing the pistol. It was a close-up of his eyes and close-up of his arm pulling out the gun out of his jacket, not drawing it. So not drawing the pistol and not cocking it, and certainly not pulling the trigger. But he's Harlan Rust, guys. He's an actor. And actors are going to act. And when he's in character, he's going to shoot anyone in sight. Everyone's a threat. Really? I mean, this is hard to buy. This is imaginative defense, but really hard to buy.
His hands. His mind is somewhere else, in the being of another, a century away, an outlaw. He must be able to take that weapon and use it as the person he's acting would. to wave it, to point it, to pull the trigger like actors do in ways that would be lethal in the real world, but are not lethal on a movie set. And I'm going to show you that scene now before lunch. And if we could just play action.
Right. Note that this is the shot before lunch, not after lunch when this tragic accident. I even hate to call it an accident because I really believe Alec Baldwin in some ways willed it into existence by his actions and by his own disturbed and deranged psyche. But so this is a very clever way to trick the jury to think that he was practicing or that he had to do these actions.
I'm gonna go find some help.
I don't need no damn help.
You're gonna die if I don't.
He's wounded on the run. So play again. Continue.
Arlen Rust. Need you stand up nice and slow, tossing your weapons you have.
He's on the church pew, bleeding, his hand gripping the revolver. He would defend himself against the men in the movie. Play.
One more. You good? Ready?
Arlen Rust. Did you get up nice and slow, tossing the weapons you have?
Well, how close can I get? Right there?
Joe, you want me to wait to give you that line till he lands, till camera lands?
Yeah.
Yep.
7 minutes, one. Draw your gun and look up and point your gun, okay?
Okay, which way? Camera right or left? So camera left for now.
I'll stand right here for you, Alex.
So whip it out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me get this all greased. Ready? Okay, ready? Okay, ready? Ready.
And set. 30 and action.
Arlen Rust.
Do one more just like that. You got one more? Yeah.
Ready?
They want him to do it again. There's no danger. They want him to do it again.
And set. Ready. And action.
Arlen Rust.
There's no danger. They want him to do it again. Did they want him to cock the gun and fire into a group of people 3 feet away? This is. I wonder if the jury is picking up on this.
Nice.
It's a scene similar to scenes we've all seen in movies and television, performed by thousands of actors. And the scene that continues after lunch is the same scene. It's just not, unfortunately, captured on videotape. And the scene they envisioned and acted out, that prop gun was positioned in the afternoon so close to the camera that you could see inside, that you could feel it. You could feel that it was loaded. And it was loaded, of course, with dummies. Dummies to make it look like a real gun. But this one time, one of those dummies was a real bullet. The real bullet was not known to anyone in that church. Amongst the actors, directors, and crew in the scene, everyone was doing exactly how they go about their business every day on a movie, not as if some lethal element had been included in the environment. You will see creativity and movement and everyone talking and vibrant. No one had any idea that this venomous, toxic element had been inserted into this magic they were creating. But it did. It entered that place. It killed an amazing person. It wounded another, and it changed lives forever. And so to find out what happened.
Did you get that, everybody? The bullet killed an amazing person. The gun had nothing to do with it. It was the bullet that killed killed her. Never mind that people, if it were a dummy, I'm not a dummy, I'm sorry. Is that right, a dummy? No, not a dummy, a blank. If it were a blank, excuse me, a blanket could have killed someone. Never mind that and Brandon Lee's tragic death from that. It's the bullet. The bullet should be on trial right here, guys, and it's not. Where is this? Let's get the bullet. Let's put a manhunt out for the bullet and get it on trial, because my movie star client doesn't need to be on trial, guys. The madness of this opening.
Happened on that movie set. You need to do something that the prosecutors could never do. You have to step back and remember what they were doing on a movie set. What were Halyna Hutchins, the cinematographer, Joel Souza, the director, and Alec Baldwin, the actor, doing on Bonanza Creek Ranch? You know, movies and magic have always been closely associated. The first people that made movies were magicians. And this imagination that happens in movies, you know, King Kong, he can stand above a city, and Superman can fly, horses and snakes and gun battles.
And my client can just fire off a gun. That's the magic of movies. Fire off guns at random, and no one dies. That's the magic of movie making.
For this to all,
I'm not going to play all of this. I'm just going to play a little bit more of this, and we're going to move on. But I think it's really worth it. It's so manipulative. It's so I would say creative in a sleazy, slimy kind of way. It's worth going over a little bit.
Work for cinematography, what Halyna did to work, for acting to work. You have to be so close to the barrier of real and imagined that the viewer feels that they're there, that it's real. The viewer decades, bang, bang.
Well, excuse me. So was this like a borderline insanity defense? He was in character and didn't know what he was doing? Is that what he's saying? It's bizarre.
From the stuntman. The stuntman must leap. The snake must hiss. And guns happen in movies all over this country for many decades. Bang, bang. You've all seen it. Guns have been an element of theater and film and television since the earliest of times. Depictions of war and combat, Spartacus, it stirs audiences because it feels real. Later films, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, they showed the unvarnished realities of war. This ranch in Santa Fe, it had been the scene to many gunfights and movie scenes well before Alec was even born. Laramie, Butch and the Sundance Kid, and these westerns.
And so this is just very rare that you get an objection in opening statements. And there was a few by the prosecution. Most lawyers will, out of respect, since this is an argument, it really does feel like argument, though, here. It should just be like, here's the evidence, here's our case. You know, closing is the time when you can argue. And that sure feels like an argument. There's his fake Spanish wife.
The evidence will show that guns are in movies.
And it looks like they got that objection sustained there. See, look how he goes. He goes right from his fantastical opening, mentioning 50,000 great movies, Spartacus, Apocalypse Now, and Rust was going to be right in that line of great movies. And my client, it was just character acting.
Because movies are about people's lives and guns are in people's lives. So let's talk about the evidence and how the lethal bullet got there. How did this happen and how did it unfold? The evidence will be the following. Everybody on a movie set has a role. The armorer armors, the director directs, the actor acts. They work in harmony, but they have a division of responsibility. Safety, being important, has the first assistant director, whose name is Dave Halls, above the armorer and the sort of the safety of the set. And on that day in question, the cast and the creative directors and crew in the church, it's a fake church. Their actors are not in their normal clothes. It's costumes. There's debris falling from the ceiling. It's fake debris. And they yell out cold gun. And that is an important term you're going to learn in this case. It means that the gun is cold. No one need worry. But even that requires a little bit more explanation. Cold gun doesn't mean no live bullets. There are for sure 100% no live bullets on movie sets. That's unimaginable. Cold means you don't even have the fake blank poof.
Cold gun means you can just fire into a crowd at random. So this is, I think, a really good place to leave it. I think it gives you a really good idea of not only just the prosecution opening, but the defense opening. I don't know if I'm going to be live streaming this case every day, but I will be talking about it on this channel because I think Alec Baldwin, as someone who's lived in New York, Alec Baldwin has been a notable character and one that's constantly getting in these kind of trouble with the law, and had not just in New York. I mean, I think he's known internationally all over the world for calling his daughter and calling her a rude little pig, and just all these really stomach turning kind of episodes, getting in fights with cops when he was in the bike lane, riding his bike, getting in such heavy argument over a parking space that he had to go to court over it. So I think it's a really interesting case, and it seems sort of like, a lot of people aren't surprised, and I would say I would be one of them. He's always had this really dark side, willing to jump on these innocence fraud campaigns of killers, and really some of the most deranged and dangerous ones, some of the most extremely guilty killers. And there's people who are duped by innocence fraud campaigns, and then there are just some people who are including celebrities who are on team criminal, and they relate to the criminal, they fantasize about taking people's lives. And I would put Alec Baldwin in that category. He's just a really dark figure. And here is 1 minute. Oh, I just had it. Hold on 1 second. Let me do it a different way. Hold on 1 second. And he's Alec Baldwin, I would put in that category. So this is John Schneider's video he did about gun, and everybody, and it really echoes everyone who knows anything about handling a gun. Here we go. 1 second. Thanks for your patience, guys. It's been a long day. And his feelings about Alec's culpability. And, a lot of the gun safety experts said it's really, Paul's total, not Dave Halls took a plea. The assistant director, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, got convicted of manslaughter, the same charge that Alec Baldwin is up on, which has a maximum of 18 months. Hannah Gutierrez Reed got the maximum. But there are many gun safety experts or gun enthusiasts who all say that really the buck stops with Alec Baldwin, that they really feel that he's almost solely to blame. And here's an actor talking who's worked with guns and who is a gun enthusiast talking about Alec Baldwin and his taking of Halyna Hutchins' life.
Hey, folks, we're live here on YouTube. I was about to start my new podcast called Don't Get Me Started. But I guess that's what this is. So I want to hear from people. I want to hear from you out there. Right now, there's nobody listening. There's nobody watching. But I want to hear from you what you think about this latest nonsense. Alec Baldwin to give first in-studio interview after Rust shooting with ABC's George Stephanopoulos. Well, first of all, George Stephanopoulos is the poster boy for leftist propaganda. So why in the world anyone would look at an interview with George as being anything enlightening or having a modicum of truth, I don't know. But that's just me.
Which is really interesting because George Stephanopoulos was just saddled with, and I think did a very good job, not to get political, but I thought he did a really surprisingly good job with his interview with Biden. Really pressed him on the key issues. I thought it would be a much softer interview. But Alec Baldwin came across so poorly in Stephanopoulos' interview, and that was his comeback. We know that he did that interview against his lawyer's wishes because he had to work. And I bring it back to how I opened this episode, asking the question once again, is the greatest punishment for Alec Baldwin the being a D or D minus or F-list celebrity? Is that the greater punishment than doing 18 months and coming out and sort of, Hollywood seems to love criminals. I mean, would his career do better if he got convicted of this crime or not convicted? I don't think anybody wants to work with him anyway. And he's up to his eyeballs in civil suits. My understanding is he paid Matthew Hutchins, Halyna's husband, civilly. He's selling his Hamptons home, which is an amazing property. Pictures I've seen of it, which was like his crown jewel. He's suffering financially. There's more lawsuits coming down the pike. Gloria Allred was there in front of court showing pictures of Halyna and Matthew and their little boy, and saying that Alec Baldwin had taken his baby and held it in front of the jury as a ply for sympathy. And this is the real victim. So it makes me think, she's a civil lawyer. So all the civil lawyers are looking to get paid, and they're looking to get paid from Alec Baldwin's pocket and whatever kind of insurance that this film had.
Okay. This journalist has walked the party line since he showed up at the party's front door. So it says here, sat down Tuesday. It was raw. It was intense. This is all designed to make us feel sorry for Alec Baldwin, especially this. As you can imagine, Stephanopoulos said, he is devastated. But he was also very candid. He was very forthcoming. He answered every question. He talked about Halyna. Pardon me if I don't pronounce that correctly. Meeting with her family. He went into detail, and I have to tell you, I was surprised in many places over the course of that hour and 20 minutes we sat down yesterday. This is investigative journalism, okay? I mean, even now, I find it hard to believe. It just doesn't seem real to me. This is what Alex said, okay?
So that sound of like a motor running, I don't know if it's a fan or an air conditioner is on just on the video. But he's right. These journalists are like ghouls. They're so insensitive. It's unreal. They have no feeling. They're like, we sat down with accused manslaughter actor, and he was so candid. He was like, I'm not the victim. I'm not responsible. I'm not the victim, but I'm not responsible. There's only one victim here, right? and it had nothing to do with my actions. Like, give me a break. It was, so what I'm asking is that interview going to come in? I'm so curious if that interview is going to come in. Be so interesting to see the unedited video of that. And I wonder, wouldn't think it would be coming in, but the jury would never stop throwing up. It was awful. He's so universally disliked, Alec Baldwin. The worst thing he could do is take the stand. And I'm sure his lawyers are smart enough to keep him off the stand. On one hand, you can say he's an actor, and I'm sure he could squeeze out some tears. He can always have an onion in his pocket as a backup. But on the other hand, I just can't imagine him winning over this very down home, salt of the earth, New Mexico jury. What do you think?
And he was teary-eyed. I mean, it affected him so much. It's bullshit. Okay? Yeah, teary-eyed. The trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger. Okay? This is what we are being told right now. Stephanopoulos says, so you never pulled the trigger, to which Baldwin replies, no, no, no. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never. Okay? This is what we're being told. Stephanopoulos then continues, you say you're not a victim, but I guess they wrote it wrong. Is this the worst thing that ever happened to you? Yes, yep. Baldwin says, because I think back. Then I think of what could I have done? Okay, then you read a little further in. It says, Hutchins was shot and killed as Baldwin rehearsed with what he believed to be an empty gun on the set of Rust in New Mexico in October. He was handed the weapon by Assistant Director David Halls, who had been given the gun by Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the 24-year-old armorer on the film. Halls reportedly called cold gun as he handed it over. Remember, we just heard that Mr. Baldwin did not pull a trigger. Okay, now, in the same article,
what he's pointing out is it's such a ridiculous argument that he didn't pull the trigger that not even his $1 million lawyer, Hollywood lawyer, I mean, he's from New York, is going to argue this. He's going to say that he pulled the trigger, but he didn't knowingly pull the trigger. He didn't mean to pull the trigger. He accidentally pulled the trigger. Even he isn't going to stick with this narrative. But Alec Baldwin was like, I never point a gun. I didn't do what a whole crowd full of people saw me do. Strangely, for no reason. It wasn't anything they were practicing. No reason at all. Now, I've told you my reason. I think that Alec Baldwin, this is his fantasy. He was in a fantasy. He wanted to accidentally shoot someone. He developed this was his idea for Rust. And what is the plot of Rust? It's about someone who can't get over the accidental shooting. I think it was of a little boy. Correct me if I'm wrong. Harlan Rust. That's his tragic past. And here it comes through. And everybody on the set knows a gun went off, but Alec Baldwin. Everyone rushes to help the victims, but Alec Baldwin, who sits back in his chair and watches. I mean, what's going on? Nobody finds that strange behavior. Nobody can comment. No journalist can comment on that. Come on.
In the same article, as Baldwin then practiced drawing and firing the weapon, a bullet discharged, injuring director Joel Souza and killing Hutchins. So what is it, George? Are we to believe that a gun went off by itself? Are we to believe that someone didn't pull a trigger? Are we to believe that somehow magically on the first part of your teary-eyed, nonsensical journalism that we believe that Alec didn't pull the trigger, and then what? 3 paragraphs later, It's described how he did, in fact, pull the trigger, and no one calls attention to that. Seriously? No one calls attention to that? This is a wonderful business we all work in. We are honored and privileged to be part of it. So when someone takes a crap, which obviously George and Alec have done here, and obviously this woman is still deceased. Her family is still without a mother, without a wife. This is absurd. We are now starting to see the propaganda machine, in my opinion, this is my opinion. I could be wrong, but I'm from New York. So because I'm from New York, I don't think I am. And I'm from one town over from the Baldwin clan. Okay. So we're to believe that this man is a victim. 3 weeks ago, it was a prop gun. 4 weeks ago, nobody knew how in the world this real weapon was loaded on the set. And today, he didn't pull the trigger. What kind of idiots do you take us for? Law enforcement, people who are in charge of this investigation, please do not stop investigating. Please do not believe the prop gun propaganda. And by all means, do not believe the I didn't pull the trigger nonsense. Guns do not go off by themselves. Let us not forget this was a single action. It was not a Colt. It was a replica. I'm told. I read, right?
So I know nothing about guns, but I know that you have to do several actions to fire it. You have to cock it and you have to press the trigger. But he's on to Alec Baldwin's BS. So my boyfriend just walked in and he's like, "You're crazy. What are you saying? He meant to accidentally." I was like, go back to my old episodes. Go back to every comment he ever made about wanting to accidentally kill someone. All the killers that he's aligned with, that he's jumped on their innocence fraud campaign. Go to the plot of Rust. He's like, really? But it does sound to a sober mind, to a sober, non-narcissistic mind, it sure sounds crazy. But everybody's in shock but Alec. Why?
I read, like everybody has read, a single action weapon needs to be cocked and fired. So what kind of idiots do you take us for? So this wasn't done and this wasn't done, and yet the gun went off and fired down. Think about people. Where would they have to have been in order for this to happen? Down on the ground, looking up, as cinematographers and directors often do. I've done it myself many times. Aim here. We've been all through that whole thing. But there is no world unless somebody randomly ran in behind, and I don't even think this would work. I'm being a little bit sarcastic now because I'm pissed off. Unless someone randomly came in while Mr. Baldwin had the gun out and hit the thing with a hammer, and even then, I mean, there is just no world in which guns go off by themselves. So he never pulled.
So let's talk about this hammer. So just speaking of hammer, another defense talking point is that I believe in the tests, so they tested this gun to see if there was something defective about this particular gun. Could it fire on its own without the trigger being pulled? Because Alec Baldwin was so emphatic that, emphatically denied that he ever pulled the trigger. He was absolutely positive. He would never pull the trigger. That they tested this gun in so many ways that they broke it. I think they finally got it to fire by slamming it like on the ground. I mean, that's hardly a gentle squeeze or an unconscious squeeze. But where's the cocking? It's, the cocking. It's like two motions. And the day before, he's saying, "Move out of the way. I don't want to point the gun at you." And then the day after, when a whole bunch of the crew leaves, he's happy to point the gun at everybody. It's nothing I could ever prove. It's just my own personal opinion. Just looking at Alec Baldwin's psyche, looking at the things he said, looking at his history, looking at his history of retaliation and of explosive anger when he feels slighted and powerless and small. He explodes and he wants to show his power. What greater way to show your power than to point and fire? I don't think he expected a live round in there. I think he did think there was a dummy round in there. But he prepared his whole life for the fact that maybe one day there would be a live round in there and he would accidentally kill someone. Sounds crazy, right? I just happen to think it's true. I think it's really at the heart of the case. Why was everybody upset? I mean, here's the picture. Do I still have it up or did I pull it down? I think I pulled it down. I'll get it. Of Alec Baldwin on the set of Rust. And I thought he was more hunched over. I think that may be another one, but he's like talking. He's like leaning forward. He's always leaning forward. Someone reminded me that he had hip surgery. Of course, he paid for out of pocket recently. I think 2022, if I'm remembering correctly. But John Schneider knows the business. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about how well actors can connect through a screen and how powerful that is. And if there's any Alec Baldwin fans on the jury, I think it's going to be a hard time convicting him, because I think people really want to believe that the person they see on the screen, the person that makes them laugh on SNL so much is real. And boy, as someone who grew up in the business, his father worked in the business, his godmother worked in the business, the reality of these characters is so bleak. There's seldom there's nothing but disappointment. That's all I'm going to say. These images have been carefully crafted, and it says something that Alec Baldwin, who has all this PR money and all these props, PR agents and publicists, is still known to be somewhat of a douche. I think that's putting it mildly.
Pull the trigger. That's what we're hearing now. And Hutchins is still deceased. And their family is not getting an apology. They're not getting any, in my opinion, they're not getting any justice. They're not getting any answers. And their question has to be very simple. What happened? What happened to my mother? What happened to my wife? What happened on that day? And now, like in a playground somewhere, I'm sorry, I'm going to read your comments in a second. In a playground somewhere where someone just pushed someone, let's get really childish for a moment. Kids are in a playground, someone's pushing someone on a swing, and someone says, "Oh no, that's enough." And the bully pushes even further, and the child falls off the swing and breaks their neck. What is the bully going to say? I didn't push her. I didn't push her. I didn't push her. First, they're going to say, I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on. Then if that doesn't work, which, by the way, it still doesn't work because you are supposed to check the weapon, you fellow. But then you have the audacity to say, I didn't pull the trigger. I didn't pull the trigger. What I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Benefit of the doubt. Let's say you were handed a gun and you were told it was cold. It's still inexcusable that you didn't check it. But let's just say it was cocked. Single action, it's cocked. So now all you have to do is pull the trigger. Very easy to accidentally pull that trigger, by the way, in that instance. Usually people who are handed a weapon that are cocked, it doesn't ever happen really, but I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Usually they shoot their own foot off because the first thing you do is put the gun down by your side. And the weight of the gun will pull it just a little bit and you'll shoot your foot. So
is anyone else getting from this that that gun safety, when you've really handled guns a lot, is as natural and as robotic as putting on a seatbelt if you're used to putting on a seatbelt every time you get in a car or a plane or whatever, you just do it, you don't think about it. And it's so against everything you've been taught to cock the pistol and either unintentionally or intentionally squeeze the trigger and while aiming it at a crowd of people. And you have to remember that that everyone on the set loved Halyna and respected her. And now that, of course, we have the benefit of we don't have the benefit of asking before this tragic accident happened, but she was the get on this low budget film because her work was, by all accounts, really impressive. And you can see how she made a low budget film look like $1 million, how beautifully lit it was. Looks much better than the performances just by the the rough cut that we saw in court. So what is Alec Baldwin doing? He's angry, and they're going to try to make the best of it, try to get as many shots in as they can, but he's losing money by the minute because Alec Baldwin, who supported another set striking workers for their conditions, wouldn't give his own workers, wouldn't pay for them to have good living conditions. And this is what we talk about when we talk about Hollywood phonies, and right, they're all for a cause unless it affects their wallet, right? They're all for a cause in the abstract. They're all for the little guy in the abstract, unless it's going to lighten their wallet.
To believe that someone handed you a gun and you didn't check it and they didn't check it. And then you went through a rehearsal where you must have, because by your own words, you pulled it out of a holster. So somewhere in that pulling it out of a holster, the gun didn't go off. And then you must have put your finger on the trigger because you can wave that gun around and it will not go off because the trigger needs to be pulled. And then you pointed at someone and then what? What? Aliens pull the trigger? Who pulled the trigger? If the man holding the gun did not pull the trigger, who pulled the trigger? You can't run through a school zone and run over children and be the only one in the car and claim you weren't driving. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Okay, they taught us better at Harvey Day Camp in 1967, for crying out loud. A ghost did it.
Right. I think this is a good place to leave it. But I mean, he just makes so many good points. And I think I'm going to leave it. I think the best reporting has been on this whole case and really gets the whole flavor of Alec Baldwin is comedian Kyle Dunnigan. I played this in the live stream, but I'm going to play it today and end it here for today. I think tomorrow what I'm going to do is try to live stream on a different computer and keep my 6 o'clock time. And so that even if it's not over, I can just, I don't know, keep my 6 o'clock regular time and handle the end of the day the next day for whatever I miss last 2 hours. But here's Kyle Dunnigan as Alec Baldwin, the most realistic take on the Alec Baldwin situation.
Hello there. Alec Baldwin here with another inappropriate Instagram post. I just wanted to quickly thank you all for the well wishes I've received. People saying how shocked they are that this happened to me and not Stephen. This is clearly a Stephen Baldwin situation. And your beautiful condolences about the loss of my good friend, cinematographer Hannah Montana. She was my friend. We went to dinner once. Unlike that armorer girl, who I don't even remember, women over 140 pounds are invisible to me. I literally can't see them. Excuse me.
Okay.
Sorry, that was my wife, Ilaria. She's from España, born in a little town known as Boston, Massachusetts. Anyway, we all can agree the armor girl should probably be put to death, but that's not up to us. That's up to poor people who don't know how to get out of jury duty.
Okay, that's the great Kyle Dunnigan and his fantastic Alec Baldwin imitation. Thank you for listening. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode. I'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Talk about this trial, hopefully. And thanks for listening, everybody, and watching with me. Have a good night.